Our scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, verses 25 through 34. And a large crowd followed Jesus and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. And she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." May God add his blessing to our understanding of his word. This morning, we have a very special guest preacher whom both Time Magazine and CNN has recognized as the top 10 preachers alive. He has served as a Disciples of Christ pastor and a professor of homiletics at several disciples' seminaries over his career. It is true that the Reverend Dr. Fred Craddock died in 2015, but by the grace of our denomination's video history and the miracle of technology, he'll be preaching a sermon this morning that is a good setup for the series that Pastor Jesse will be starting in July.
There's nowhere to run. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. There's no way that Clay would have known when asking me to preach that he was stirring in my mind a memory of 65 years ago. I came by here, Woodmont. There was one building, I think it was a converted dwelling, a red brick building. I think that's my memory. If it wasn't here, it should have been. The reason I came to see Dr. Drwoda about 65 years ago. I was a teenager trying to figure out if I was called to preach, and I wanted some certainty. I wanted somebody to say, "Yes, of course." I think I was looking for what John Donne asked for in his prayer: "Batter my heart, three-personed God. As yet you but knock and breathe and shine and tend to mend. Batter my heart, make me sure." I met with Dr. Drwoda. He was very kind to me, and he taught me another side of God. I guess you could call it the modesty of God. It has been adequate all these years. Those who decided on the theme for the assembly must have done it before the recession. Because the theme says tell it, and that means you've got to have a lot of words. And the recession has hurt the vocabulary, I can tell you. Not just the purse, not just the wallet, but the vocabulary. There is a growing scarcity of words. It's not panic time. I don't think there is near us a famine of the Word of God in the land. I'm not one of those who tries to scare people, but I want you to know it's serious. It's especially hard on the older people because they had saved out enough words to use until their death and put the others in savings. And now they're having to dip into their savings. And some of those words are old and quaint. I heard the other day, conniption, gumption. It's hurting married couples. Some are hardly speaking. There just are not enough words. And the children are told, do not speak until spoken to. It's a serious problem. I went to a wedding not long ago, and the ceremony was trimmed down and slimmed down, just so few words in it. I don't know if the marriage will last. Took out the expression, I plight thee my troth. Now, how can they get along without that? There are funerals. There are funerals now in which bodies are put in the earth and nobody says any words over them. The hardest hit, of course, is the church. The church is a house of words. And now, where are we? You go to some churches, the scarcity has produced a terrible condition. Ministers are saying the same thing every Sunday. Not enough words. Some ministers have been told by the board of elders, why don't you cut it a little short? You see what's happening. I notice there are churches that are opening their vaults now and getting out words that they haven't used in a long time. Some church, I think it was in Tennessee, opened the vault where the vocabulary was kept and pulled out the word charismatic. Scared the whole denomination. A lot of division. You actually heard disciples asking, can you speak in tongues? No, I hardly have enough words to speak as it is. That's a luxury I can't afford. Well, somebody put the word back in the vault. We're safe for a while. I noticed, though, in Georgia, that some disciples have pulled out of the vault and are beginning to use the word saved. I never heard that in a disciple church. It's beneath the gentility and speculative power of the disciple that we don't say saved. I noticed in a restaurant recently, somebody said to a woman, I wasn't involved with either of them, but she apparently had married a minister recently, and she had a very naughty tattoo. And the fellow said, isn't that tattoo a little naughty for a minister's wife? And she said, I got the tattoo before I got saved. What's she talking about? The word is out, saved. We never have used it much. How many got saved? You don't hear that among us. You hear it among some churches. Oh, we used to laugh about it and joke about it, people getting saved. You ask someone, what's your denomination? They tell you, and you say, well, do you believe once saved, always saved? No. I got saved 17 times. None of them took except the last one, then I was nearly dead. I don't know what to make of this. I do know that I felt the responsibility as a teacher in the disciples' denomination to investigate the Word to see if we had a real place for it. We're a Bible people, and when all else fails, turn to the Scriptures. And so I looked up the word saved. I was really surprised what I found. There was a woman with a hemorrhage who came up in the crowd and said to herself, as she pressed forward, "If I but touch the hem of his garment, I will be made well," is the way it's translated, just to make it easy on you. What she said was, "If I but touch the hem of his garment, I will be saved." There's more than her hemorrhage here. She's isolated from her family. She has no place in the community. She has no place in the place of worship. She is ostracized, isolated, and is a nobody until she got saved. You can call it getting well if you want to. Jesus saves. There was a blind beggar near Jericho on the side of the road when the parade came by going up to Jerusalem. The people happy and shouting, and he was sitting there on the side of the road, blind as a bat, smelly, a cast-off, a throwaway. If you ever saw one, he was a throwaway. Mucused eyes fastened together, could not see. "Jesus, Jesus, help me." And the people said, "Shut up, old man. Who wants a blind beggar? We can do without blind beggars. They don't carry their weight." And Jesus said, "What do you want?" "I want to see." And Jesus said, "Your faith has made you well." There you go again. Your faith has saved you. Here is a man in rags, blind, cast off, not loved, not cared for, and in a few moments he is in the parade marching up with hallelujahs and hosannas to the city of Jerusalem with all the rest of the people. You can call it get well if you want to. Jesus saves. There was a woman, Luke said, a woman of the city. She was a sinner, Luke said. She washed his feet. Jesus paid attention to her. He forgave her sins and said, "Your faith has saved you." Interesting that the translators say saved when it involves sins, but when it involves crippled limbs, blind eyes, and all of that, what is it? Getting well. Go in peace. I wonder if Jesus had in mind some place to go. If there was ever a call for the church, it's in that sentence, go in peace, because there's nowhere for her to go. If she can't become a member of Woodmont, where is she going to go? Jesus saves. There was a tax collector, a rich man, Zacchaeus, in Jericho, climbed the tree to see Jesus. Jesus stopped and said, "Come down. I'm going home with you for lunch." He went to his house. Everybody complained. All the poor people said, "Look at him. He's going in and talking with a sinner." One of the few privileges of being poor is being mad at the rich people. And now Jesus goes in there. Well, what they talked about, we don't know, but when the meeting was over, Jesus heard the man say, "I'm giving one half, 50% of all I have to the poor. And if I've ever defrauded anybody, I will restore it 400%. You know what Jesus said? salvation has come to this house. Salvation? What happened? Shook the man loose from his money, free from his greed. No longer going up and down the street trying to find the market where life is sold. He found it. Jesus saves. I'm beginning to kind of like this word. It's a much bigger word than I thought it was. In fact, I think it is probably the biggest word in the New Testament. Because in Luke 4, when Jesus described his ministry, the eyes of the blind, prison doors are opened, the oppressed go free, all that marvelous list of what his ministry did, the ministry of salvation. The closing line in the quotation he read from Isaiah 61 is, "And to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." A lot of times we preach on it and just leave that part out. You know what that refers to? The year of Jubilee. To announce the year of Jubilee. Now, you may not be up on your Jubilee. Leviticus 25, as you know, the ethical system and moral life as well as religious life of Israel was founded on the idea of the Sabbath. You don't go running off in any direction, but you got to stop and rest. You're not going to do anything, but you have to stop and rest. Think about it, pray about it, give God the glory. The Sabbath, every seventh day, the Sabbath. Every seventh year is a Sabbath year. And every 7 years times 7 is a Sabbath year. But it's special that year. The 50th year, every cycle, the 50th year, when the ram's horn is blown, at the first day of the Day of Atonement, everybody goes home. Everybody is restored. The old home place that you lost, you got it. No more holding it in foreclosure. It's yours again. Every inch of the universe is touched by the grace of God. The Sabbath touches the peach trees, the olive trees, the fish in the creek, the sky, the birds, human beings. It is the biggest expression of the work of Jesus Christ in the New Testament that he has come to announce the year of Jubilee. That's not just a few sick people getting well, a few cripples being healed. It's not just a matter of somebody being returned from sin. It is touching the universe. There is not 1 square inch of the universe, birds and fish, people, trees, flowers, everything restored, renewed, no longer broken, no longer shattered. It's just a dream. I get goose pimples just thinking about that Jesus has come to do that. But I know when you bring it up, there's usually a scholar in the room, and the scholar says there is no evidence that Israel ever tried to practice the year of Jubilee. You can't have any fun if there's a scholar around. There is no evidence that it was ever practiced. So what? It was a hope for everybody that had lost their land. They get it back. You can't accumulate, because in 50 years you got to go back and give it away again. What's the motivation for being greedy? It's wiped out. It is a remarkable thing. Well, there's no evidence there. It was a hope, a dream, a vision. Since Genesis 3. The first time I ever heard the word Jubilee was from a playmate of mine on a farm near us in West Tennessee. He was 80-something years old. I was 6 and 7. But we played together, and he taught me things. And I asked him once, Will, have you ever been in a church? He said, been in a church? All the time I'm in a church. I said, go to a church. And he said, I go every Sunday. Really? Well, what's it like? What's it like? He said, you wouldn't believe what it's like. When I walk up to that golden door and touch that silver handle and open the door and 100 voices say, welcome, Will, I go in and they start singing. I bet you there are 500 in the choir, and the top of that little building is blue like the ceiling of heaven, and stars sprinkle over everything, and everybody's singing, including the angels. It is absolutely unbelievable. Do I go to church? Of course I go to church. I went to his church once. It seated about 60, unpainted board frame building, sitting up on fieldstone at the four corners with a deep sag in the middle, hand-whittled and thrown together furniture, just a few old people fanning with the funeral home fans. Where in the world did Will get that? Was he just pulling my leg? This is not Saturday morning cartoons about the happy hippopotamus or something. We're talking big here, and look at it. A little frame building about to fall down. I didn't realize until much later that Will could see what I couldn't see. That sometimes God disguises the good stuff, and you have to close your eyes to see it. I learned that later. Of course it was hope. It all started with hope. Somebody went running up and down through Galilee saying, we found the Messiah is here, the Messiah is here. Plows were left in the fields. Bread was left in the oven. School turned out early. The shops were left unattended. We found the Messiah, and they came running, and they came running, and they came running, and they followed him, and they followed him. The crowds grew, and then they saw the cross. The Messiah, they saw the cross. And suddenly, what seemed to be the grand hope turned. And the hope became an assignment. And if you find anybody who's really, really saved, this is what happened. I first went because I thought, wherever Christ is, there is no misery. Wow. But now I realize wherever there is misery, there Christ is. It's a hope. It's more than a hope. So Jesus finished the reading, and he gave the scroll back to the attendant and sat down, and every eye in the room was fixed on him, and he anticipated their question. He anticipated their question. And he said, you want to know when this is going to happen? He said, today. Today. Earth shall keep her jubilee. Jesus saves. Jesus saves. Sing, ye islands of the sea, echo back, ye ocean caves. This our song of jubilee. Jesus saves. I think we might start using the word again. I sense it's really, really true. Somebody may even ask you, and you'll be sort of inclined to snicker, but they may ask you, are you saved?